Some numbers speak louder than every word ever said. 35. That was the number of agents assigned for years to America's most critical internal watchdog unit, the Public Integrity Section. A carefully selected, nonpartisan team of 35 experienced investigators specifically designed to probe corruption at every level, including elected officials. Now, that number is 2. This isn't a budget cut. This is a deliberate, blinding operation. And when Pam Bondi stood before Congress as the architect of that operation, she couldn't hide the numbers, because Congressman Joe Neguse already knew them. I'm going to break down that hearing layer by layer. But first, you need to understand this. This story isn't just about a staffing decision. It's a documented power story about who gets protected, who doesn't, and exactly what kind of vacuum allowed a $1.4 billion fortune to grow. And if you follow the numbers closely, everything becomes clear. Every institutional collapse begins with a symbol. Pam Bondi's symbol was Jared Weissy. Shortly after taking office at the Department of Justice, Bondi placed Weissy on the federal payroll. The public didn't recognize the name, but January 6th investigators did, because Weissy had been caught on high-definition police body cam footage on the steps of the Capitol that day. The footage was clear. The audio was clear. Even the words he shouted at officers on duty were unmistakable. Bondi's response to the hire was just one word: pardon. A presidential pardon issued by Trump would, in her view, clean up Weissy's record, at least according to Bondi's interpretation. But to a careful investigator, that defense meant something very different. A pardon can erase a criminal record. It cannot erase the footage, it cannot erase the voice, and it cannot erase the message that hire sends. Placing that kind of profile at the top of the Department of Justice signaled exactly whose standards the institution would now operate under. Weissy's presence wasn't an accident or a mistake. It was a declaration. And as Bondi defended it, not a single line on her face shifted. But Weissy wasn't the real story. The real story was what all that noise around Weissy was covering up. Because while the public was busy debating him, Bondi was carrying out a much quieter, much deeper, and far more permanent operation. It didn't have a name, but it had numbers, and those numbers told the whole story. The most sensitive point in the American legal system is the Public Integrity Section, known as PIN. This unit is a carefully structured, nonpartisan investigative force designed to examine corruption among elected and appointed federal officials. Historically, its existence has served as the last line of defense to ensure those in power never feel untouchable. It operates without regard to party. It carries no ideology. It follows only evidence and data. When Joe Neguse turned his attention to this unit during the hearing, the question was simple: how many people are working there? Bondi tried to avoid answering. She pivoted. She used the word weaponization like a shield. Neguse pressed, and eventually the number came out: 2. From 35 agents down to 2. 33 experienced nonpartisan federal investigators were either removed or reassigned. The 2 remaining individuals are now responsible for overseeing the entire federal corruption ecosystem in the United States. That's not just unlikely, it's impossible. 2 people cannot physically oversee thousands of federal officials, dozens of agencies, and countless financial transactions. But when that impossibility is designed on purpose, it produces a very real outcome. Investigative capacity is effectively reduced to 0. On paper, the unit still exists. No one has to say it was shut down. It simply stops functioning. Investigations can't be opened. Evidence can't be tracked. Leads can't be followed. At this point, Bondi built her defense around an anti-weaponization narrative. She argued that in previous years, the Department of Justice had been used as a political tool. But Neguse dismantled that argument with a single line: if investigating politicians before was considered weaponization, what do you call eliminating the ability to investigate now? There was no answer. Because there isn't one. There's only an admission of choice. These investigators are gone because their presence would have meant certain investigations would continue. Investigations that were not meant to continue. And when that decision is paired with the next move, the full picture becomes deeper and clearer. The most critical moment of the Bondi hearing may have been the least discussed, because the quietest moments are often the most important. The National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, known as NCET, was a specialized unit created to investigate money laundering, fraud, and financial crimes in digital asset markets. In a world where cryptocurrency systems operate differently from traditional banking, and where transaction trails require highly technical expertise, this team represented a rare and valuable capability. These were the people who could track digital asset flows, decode wallet addresses, and perform blockchain analysis. Neguse asked, "How many people are working in that unit today?" Bondi didn't answer. She deflected. She tried to move on. Neguse came back to it. Bondi stretched the response and avoided it again. The reason she didn't answer was simple, because the answer was zero. NCET had been completely dissolved, not reduced, not restructured, not merged into another unit. It was eliminated, and its absence created an institutional blind spot in the digital asset markets. Who is buying? Who is selling? Where funds are coming from? Which wallet belongs to whom? No one could track it anymore, because the team responsible for tracking it no longer existed. Now look at exactly when that blind spot was created, and whose digital asset portfolio grew dramatically during that same period. The timing may be a coincidence, or it may not be, but there was no team left to ask that question. And when there's no one left to ask it, there's no answer. Only a number that keeps growing, unseen, untracked, and unquestioned. Sometimes numbers tell a story far more deeply than words ever can, and in this case, there are 3 numbers. When you place them side by side, they raise a question more powerful than anything said during the hearing. The first number, 35. The number of agents once assigned to the public integrity section, now reduced to 2. The second number, 0. The current size of the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team. The third number, $1.4 billion. The amount by which Donald Trump's cryptocurrency holdings have grown since Pam Bondi took over the Department of Justice. Hold these 3 numbers in your mind at the same time, and ask this question. If NCET still existed, could that $1.4 billion growth have been examined? The answer, yes. That was exactly what this team was built to do. Track major movements in digital asset markets, identify unusual transaction patterns, and open investigations when necessary. But the team is gone. PIN is down to 2 people, and $1.4 billion keeps growing. This is not an accusation. It's a question that needed to be answered. And the fact that it cannot be answered is the real problem. Because legitimate wealth growth should be easy to clear when an investigative team exists. Without one, neither innocence nor wrongdoing can be proven. The question remains open, indefinitely. And unanswered questions are the safest territory for power. Neguse drew that connection directly during the hearing. He asked how many people were in the crypto enforcement team. No answer. He asked why she wouldn't answer. Bondi deflected. He laid out the connection plainly. The president's crypto assets are growing. The team responsible for overseeing those assets is being dismantled. So why won't you tell me how many people are left? Bondi's response was anger, and that anger revealed more than any detailed admission ever could. When an official has real answers, they stay composed. If their arguments are solid, if the numbers hold, if the logic stands, they can withstand pressure. But when they don't have answers, when there's no foundation to build a defense on, only one thing remains: pounding the table. Bondi's performance during the hearing was a textbook example of that dynamic. In the early hours, she was composed. Her tone was controlled. Her answers were quick and prepared. She had general responses for general questions. But as Neguse began laying out the numbers, that control started to break. Anger surfaced, defensive interruptions followed, attempts to seize the microphone increased. Topic shifts came one after another. Each one looked like the reflex of someone being cornered. Neguse understood that dynamic perfectly. He didn't break the rhythm of his questioning. He drove each question into the gaps left by the previous answer. How many people are in the crypto team? No answer. Why won't you answer? Because it's 0. How many are in PIN? 2. How can 2 people oversee all federal corruption? Bondi did not answer that final question. Because she couldn't. Instead, she brought back the word weaponization. She tried to redirect the conversation to alleged political abuses of the past. It was a simple, almost predictable deflection. But Neguse came back with a classic counter. How does eliminating investigative capacity today justify correcting past abuses? That question was never answered in that hearing room. As long as Bondi remained angry, she didn't have to answer. Anger is a powerful tool, not to target the person asking the question, but to delegitimize the question itself. This wasn't personal anger directed at Neguse. It was institutional anger, aimed at making the question seem invalid. But the cameras recorded everything, and the transcripts captured the gaps behind that anger, documented them. Those 33 agents weren't just 33 employees. Behind that number lies a much deeper loss. Each one carried years of institutional knowledge. People who knew how to track digital footprints, read financial patterns, unravel complex cryptocurrency transaction chains, and testify in federal corruption cases over and over again. That kind of knowledge can't be stored in a filing cabinet. It can't be backed up on a server. It moves with people. And when those people walk out the door, that knowledge leaves with them. When Bondi dismantled that team, she didn't just reduce headcount. She erased institutional memory. New appointees will need years to reach that same level of expertise. And during those years, every transaction that expertise could have investigated will remain invisible. Every financial movement will go untracked. Every digital trace will fade and go cold. This isn't a temporary blind spot. It's a structural and permanent blinding and a systematic erosion of credibility. And when an institution is blinded, it doesn't just fail to see what it can't see. It stops seeing what it doesn't want to see, because the people who knew what should be seen are no longer there. In their place are people who understand what shouldn't be seen. That difference is everything. The most memorable thing said in that hearing was what no sentence actually said, because the most powerful thing was what went unsaid. The drop from 35 to 2 agents was never stated by Bondi. It was revealed. The elimination of the crypto team was never acknowledged. It was implied through silence. The overlap between a $1.4 billion increase and a collapse in oversight was never addressed directly. It was met with anger. Joe Neguse didn't do anything extraordinary in that hearing. He asked for numbers. When he didn't get answers, he asked for the same numbers again. And every unanswered question was entered into the record, permanently, irreversibly. Pam Bondi's institutional decisions are now on record. Which teams were dismantled? On record. Which questions went unanswered? On record. Which numbers were avoided? On record. And those records cannot be erased by anger, by pardons, or by rhetoric. The Department of Justice was built to govern through accountability. Investigative capacity is the only tool that makes accountability possible. When that capacity is reduced to zero, what remains is no longer a justice institution. It becomes a structure that carries the name of justice, but performs none of its function. A hollow shell. A performance. Bondi's answer was anger. Neguse's answer was the numbers in the record, and numbers outlive anger. Don't forget that.